Welcome back, crime sceners. Today we are going to talk about the murder weapon, what Craig went back into the house for, and we're going to talk about Nanette's friend M, we know her as M, and how she may not be much of a friend at all. Okay, so I know that I promised a big video about where we are at now after everything that we've spoken about, after all the new information I've got. Where do we stand with the timeline and suspects and everything else right now? And I am working on that, but every time I upload a new video, I get just a ton of emails with all new information or all new ideas or speculation, and I want to include all that sort of stuff in the big where are we at now. So then I have to keep doing these videos while I'm working on the big one. And that's what we're talking about today, the new information that I've got since the last one I uploaded. But before we get to that, I have to go through the disclaimer, which is really important today because I have to let people understand that this is just speculation and we are just kind of trying to surmise what may have happened based around the very few facts that we actually have. And I don't want Craig, I shouldn't say Craig, I should say his daughter. I don't need them going off and acting like I'm accusing them of stuff. So the disclaimer is very important today. And every day really, but mainly today. And that being said, I just want to publicly say right now that I'm sure that Craig and specifically his daughter Samantha do think that I'm trying to point fingers at Craig here with all the stuff that kind of, points towards him. And I do get a lot of emails with people who really think that he did it. I'm on the fence. I'm not pointing my fingers at anyone right now because I just don't believe that I have enough information to go, you did it. And that's not Craig, that's everybody. But I do want to say that with all my heart and soul, I hope that Craig had nothing to do with this. I hope every day that it was somebody completely different. I don't want to believe that the last thing that Nanette saw on this earth was her child attacking her so brutally. I have sons myself, and to think that they could do something like that to me, I mean, they're kids and they say some stupid shit sometimes, but they never go as far as trying to physically hurt me or murder me. But it's just not something that I even want to think about for myself or for Nanette. So even though some things about Craig seem really, really sus, I really do hope deep in my heart that it's just a coincidence. They can be explained all away and it actually was somebody else who committed this murder. And as I always say, if Craig or anybody, I don't care who it is, if anybody listens to this and knows that something I'm saying or something that I'm speculating on is completely untrue, that is why I leave my email in the description box. You can email me at any time and say, hey, that's not true. I will get straight on here and let everybody know that and that is wrong and this is what actually happened. Because all we're doing here is trying to get to the truth. I don't want to speculate. I don't want to make things up, that's for sure. But if we can get to the truth and we can actually solve this, well, that's the whole point of doing this, right? So yeah, contact me. I don't bite. I'm not here to try to upset innocent people. I just want to get the one guilty one. Anyway, back to the disclaimer. Please note that any statements or opinions expressed here are purely speculative and are not intended to accuse any individual or entity of wrongdoing. Unless otherwise stated as fact, the information provided reflects personal observations or hypotheses. Any conclusions drawn from this content should be viewed in this context. And please remember to like, subscribe and share so that we can try to get this video out to as many people as possible, because we never know who these videos are going to land in front of who might actually know that last piece of the jigsaw that puts this all together. Okay, let's get started. Somebody contacted me and made a really, really good point, which I want to tell everybody else. And that was about the killer's getaway and the blood spot on the back of Nanette's car. I already did a video about the killer coming out the front door, which we know that he did. And that Facebook page about Nanette said that it was not a contact spot, that blood spot on the back of the car. Then that would mean that the blood has flicked off of the knife as they have run out with the knife in their hand. Now, given where the car was and where the blood spot was, that basically gives two different directions that the killer could have gone. One would be straight down the driveway and straight out the front gate, or I don't know if it was a gate there, but like the opening where the driveway is anyway, straight out that way onto the street. Or they could have gone left, gone across the front lawn and then jumped the front fence and still onto the street. I personally think they have run straight out down the driveway and straight out the front. And I think that because I think that if they had gone left and they had gone across the lawn and jumped out there, I think the blood spot may have been a little bit more angled, not just straight on like that. It appears to me that the blood hit it like splat straight on, not splat side on. I know I'm using very technical words here, but stay with me. But that's what I think anyway, just by looking at it. And I am by no means an expert. But personally, I'm going to go with ran out the front door and straight out into the street. But either way he went, it doesn't really matter with what I'm about to say anyway, because somebody contacted me and said for the killer to be running in either of those directions and to get a blood spot fly off of the knife and hit the car as the person is running, then that person had to have been carrying the knife in their left hand. Once again, not an expert, but that seemed to make a lot of sense to me. I don't see how you can run in either of those directions with a knife in your right hand and have blood fly off of it and land where it did. So what's my point? Does that make the killer left-handed? If you had just stabbed someone to death and you were running out from the crime scene, would you carry your knife in your dominant hand? And actually, now that I'm saying this, I don't know if this makes any difference at all, because a little while ago I did the Couch to 5K with the Couch to 5K app on my phone, and I was wearing pants that didn't have any pockets. So I actually was carrying my phone as I was running, and I've just realised I was running with the phone being held in my left hand, even though I'm right-handed. So I don't know if this matters at all, or if the fact that he was carrying it in his left hand means he's actually right-handed. But let me know in the comments below what hand you would think that you would carry a knife in if you were running from a crime scene. Would it be your dominant hand? Would it be your non-dominant hand? Let me know. I actually wondered with this left-handed, right-handed thing when I saw Nanette's injuries, because she actually has an injury on one side of her neck and then also on the other side too. So I was like, well, are you swapping hands as you're stabbing her, or is she moving around so much that you're kind of just I know that if she's on the ground, it would be much easier to have a left entering wound and a right entering wound, because if something's on the floor, you can just basically move your hand any way you want. But I wonder if the coroner or the police have any sort of conclusion as to whether it was a right-handed or left-handed individual. Also, if you think that that means it's probably a left-handed person and you think that Craig is a really good suspect, I've actually seen Craig on a video chopping up food, and he does it with his right hand. So I think that's pretty safe to say. I can't say for sure, of course. I don't know him. I've never met him, and I certainly haven't seen him in person doing anything with his hands. But I think it's safe to say that we can presume that he is actually right-handed after watching him chop the food. So if the killer is, in fact, left-handed, that actually probably rules Craig out entirely. Okay, so now on to Nanette's friend M, who I think was kind of a crap friend at the very least. If you remember, M was supposed to be one of the ones that was supposed to go out with Nanette that night. She was supposed to go with B. M and B were supposed to go up to H's house, and Nanette was also supposed to go to H's house, and then they were all supposed to leave from H's house. Now, I've done a video on all this before, but just to recap, M testified at the inquest. She said that she had called Nanette at 5:15 to see if the plans were still in place, and that those plans that I just said were still going to happen. She said that when she didn't get an answer at 5:15, she then rang 6 times between 5:15 and 5:45. Police speculated that Nanette had been killed very soon after getting home around about 5:15, and I think that maybe M's testimony about constantly calling might have had something to do with that. That's just speculation, by the way. But in one of the earlier videos that I've done on this case, where I was talking about, was she actually really killed at 5:15 and could she have been killed later, I did discuss M's phone calls in that time period and said that maybe Nanette just didn't hear them. She did apparently have the radio up loud. She was deaf in one ear. So it was quite possible that she just didn't hear the phone. Or she could have already been dead like the police think she was. Now, in the last video, I did say what the hell was wrong with M. She was apparently very close to Nanette. She knew everything that had been going on in the weeks leading up to Nanette's murder. Nanette pretty much told her everything. M knew all about the vandalism. She had stayed over with Nanette on one of the nights in the week leading up to the murder. She testified that on the night that she stayed over at Nanette's house, that they didn't get much sleep because they were pretty much up all night talking about who could possibly be doing all this vandalism. And she had said to the inquest that they had basically gone over Nanette's whole life to see if they could figure out who might hate her enough to be doing this to her. So I have to think that they were pretty close, and she knew a lot of stuff about Nanette and what was happening with Nanette during this time period. And that's why I wondered why she did not go over and check on Nanette that night. She was ringing and ringing and ringing repeatedly and getting no answer. She's called 6 times in half an hour, which is basically every 5 minutes. Ringing and ringing and ringing over and over again, not getting an answer, knowing what Nanette has been through in the last couple of weeks, and she didn't think to go over and check on her. She just thought, oh no, I'm just going to get ready to go out and I'll meet up with Nanette later. And she's apparently just stopped at 5:45. She hasn't tried to make any contact after that. Even though they weren't supposed to meet up at H's place till about 7 o'clock. I mean, it's just very odd for such a close friend who knows everything about Nanette and everything that's been going on to just make a phone call to say, hey, are you okay? And are we still going out tonight and all that stuff? She had to have known that Nanette was probably going to be home by around about 5:15. I mean, that's why she started ringing, right? And when she hasn't got an answer, she's kept ringing and ringing and ringing. And then knowing everything that's been happening, knowing that Nanette had weapons in the house by the front door, knowing that Nanette was very scared for her life, knowing that the police obviously thought that there was some danger towards Nanette for the fact that they're escorting her everywhere, and M would have known this as well. And knowing all that, you ring 6 times for half an hour and then you just go, stuff it. I'm not going to bother with it anymore. This doesn't seem like much of a friend. I have to tell you, if this was me, I'm just being honest, even knowing all that sort of stuff, if I had rung the first time at 5:15 and I hadn't gotten an answer, I probably would have given it at least to about 5:30. Seriously, I would have given it 15 minutes just because I would have thought, no, I know that all this stuff's happening, but maybe I'm just being paranoid. I don't want to go racing over there like a lunatic. And if she's just, blow drying her hair in the bathroom and can't hear the phone, or she just hasn't gotten home yet. So I probably would have given it about 15 minutes. But after the 15 minutes, ringing 3 or 4 times, I would have been in my car and driving over there, even if I did look ridiculous and paranoid, just in case. But the reason I'm even bringing all of this up again, because we've already discussed this in the last video, that I just think that was a shitty thing to not even bother to go check. But the reason I'm bringing it up again is because somebody emailed me and said, isn't it weird that she wasn't more surprised that nobody answered the phone? The police had made it really clear that Nanette should not be left by herself. On the day that she died, she called a police officer and said she was leaving work early, round about 3 p.m. That police officer testified at the inquest, and he said that he believed that she had called him to let him know that she was going to leave early because they had told her not to be alone. Em would have known this. She seemed to know everything else that was going on. So then when she rang and she didn't get an answer from Nanette, wasn't she surprised that she didn't get an answer from anybody? If somebody was supposed to be with Nanette at all times, surely one of the kids should have answered that phone call. Now we know where they were. Well, we know that Greg was at his friend's house, and we know that Craig said that he had gone off to see his friends to go to the drive-in. So we know where they were, but Em didn't. So I'm sitting here thinking, when she rang and Nanette didn't answer, why wasn't she more concerned? But actually, she's called, and she's called several times, and nobody's answered, not even the boys. Wasn't she concerned that absolutely nobody answered? Wasn't she at least expecting that one of the boys would pick up? Ringing and ringing over and over again, 6 or 7 times in that half an hour time span, and not getting any answer at all should have been ringing alarm bells. The police officer actually testified in the inquest that they had discussed that she should not be left alone in the house at any time while these events were still occurring. They had also, on the phone on that Friday, when she rang to say she was leaving early, they'd also discussed that the escorts were still going to continue on the Monday, and that she should stay with somebody else over the weekend if she wasn't able to have someone stay in the house with her over the weekend. So I think, and I believe, that Em would have known this. If she was such a close friend and she knew everything that was going on, I'm pretty sure she would know that the police told Nanette not to be alone in the house. But on that same token, why was Nanette alone in the house? If Em knew that Nanette was not supposed to be alone in the house, I can guarantee that Craig and Greg both knew that Nanette was not supposed to be left alone in the house. So why did they both take off on the Friday afternoon knowing that their mother was going to be back from work soon? Now, this doesn't seem to be a big thing with Greg, because when Greg left, somebody was still at the house, that being Craig. So why did Craig leave the house when he knew that his mother was going to be back anytime soon? And he knew that Greg had left, so that when his mum come back, she would be alone in the house. Is that why he said that he spoke to her on the phone and she said that everything was going to be okay now? I mean, was that his excuse for going, okay, well, I can leave now. It doesn't matter that my mum's going to be left here alone because she said that everything's going to be okay? I have been unable to verify that this phone call ever happened. And it doesn't actually fit with any other information that I have received. You got the receptionist saying that she followed her home. So obviously she didn't think that it was going to be okay now, and Nanette didn't think it was going to be okay now. But then you've also got another person at the other office who said they saw Nanette and she was visibly distressed and distraught and waiting for an escort home. So that person obviously didn't think that it was going to be okay. The only way this makes sense is if it is true at all, because it could just be a lie. But if it's true, the only way this fits is if Nanette was just saying that to Craig to basically make him feel better, which as a mother I have done in the past. I think probably most mothers have told little fibs to make their kids feel better. I mean, I wouldn't be running around screaming to my kids, someone's going to kill me, someone's going to kill me. I just wouldn't. I would be trying to be, no, it's okay, everything's going to be fine, don't worry about it, because I wouldn't want to stress them or upset them or have them think that I was in danger in any way. But even as I say that, I remember Greg's testimony at the inquest, and he was talking about how Nanette was telling him about some creepy guy that she'd met in a nightclub in January. And it really made it seem to me that they had quite a different relationship than what I have with my kids, in the fact that they seemed more like buddies than mother and son. And that's the 16-year-old. So would she really be trying to make the 18-year-old feel safe and secure and better about everything that's going on? I wish there was a way that I could find out if that phone conversation even happened, because he might be using that as an excuse for the reason why he left. Now, that being said, that's not saying that he did anything wrong, although in hindsight, if he left his mother alone to be murdered, that's kind of a little bit wrong. But, he's 18 years old, he's a kid, he might have just thought, I just want to go to the drive-in with my friends and I'm sure my mum will be right, it's only vandalism, nothing's happened to her, whatever went through his head to make him leave that day, I don't know. But it could be just the fact that he was just young, and let's face it, 18-year-olds aren't really known for their foresight, are they? But after all that circular logic, my whole point being is that somebody was supposed to stay with Nanette at all times. The police have said that. Anybody around her that was close to her, Craig, Greg, and Em, would have known that this was the case. So why did the boys leave is a question. But also with Em, why did she not get an answer from anybody that day with the several times that she called? And then she still thought, no, it would be right, I'm not even going to bother go checking. That is the question. But as I said in my last video, there is information that says that Em was at somebody else's house at that time and would have been driving home in the time frame where she claims to have been calling all this time. So did she call Nanette 6 times in half an hour? Or was she driving past Nanette's house at the same time she was supposedly calling Nanette? And I have to say that either way makes Em look bad. Because either she was driving home at the time that this other person says she was, which means she's lying about the phone calls, and she's lying about the time that she supposedly made phone calls, and she's driving past the crime scene, or rough enough near the crime scene, at the time the murder's occurring, which all looks terribly bad. Or she was in fact at home calling Nanette over and over and over again, and she hasn't gotten an answer, and she hasn't bothered going to check on Nanette to see if she's okay. Neither of those two options are good in any way, shape or form. But the worst thing is I just found out that Em died in February. So if she was just a really shitty friend, we're never going to get her side of the story. And if she actually has something to do with this, well, then she's gotten away with it. Either way, we will not be getting any information out of Em. And this also shines a huge spotlight on the fact that this is a 40-year-old case. And if it's not solved soon, it might never be. There's already a few people involved with Nanette and her life that are already gone, and it's just going to get worse as it keeps going on. Okay, so lastly, we're talking about the murder weapon. We know that the police never found the murder weapon. There was nothing on the property that could have made the injuries that were on Nanette. And we already thought that the killer ran out the front door with it anyway, and that's how the blood spot got on the car. But when we were trying to work out what room Nanette was attacked in, and we decided it was either her room or the room next to hers that was right at the end of the hall, we were talking about whether it was premeditated or not. Because if Nanette was in one of those rooms, she was probably talking to the person who killed her. And if she was in there talking to them, then they probably would have had to have the knife on them for them to attack her as she left the room. And that makes it premeditated. But we were also talking about if it wasn't premeditated, maybe there was a knife in the bedroom and that person has just become angry and grabbed it just randomly and attacked her. So that would mean that it wasn't a planned out thing. But for that to be the case, that would mean that there had to be a knife in the bedroom. And why would there be a knife in the bedroom? Most people don't keep knives in their bedrooms. But then someone contacted me and reminded me that Craig was an apprentice chef. Apprentice chefs usually have their own set of knives and they might carry them around in one of those knife rolls. Or I've actually known a few apprentice chefs and they've carried their own set of knives around in a toolbox. But however Craig carried his knives around, this person who emailed me suggested that maybe Craig kept his knives in his room. And this made total sense because these are not knives that are used in the kitchen of the home. Well, maybe he did, maybe he practiced and stuff like that, but they were really to go and take to his job. So these knives might not have been kept in the kitchen. He may have very well kept his own set of knives in his bedroom. And another person who was in on this discussion actually mentioned that because Craig's room, and this might not be Craig's room actually, because we don't know which one of the boys' rooms this was. So I shouldn't say Craig's room, I should say the boys' room. One of the boys, don't know which one. But they were saying that that room that had blood spots on the wardrobe, so obviously was around about where Nanette was killed, that room was actually quite untidy, it was a bit of a mess. So they were suggesting that if the person did actually grab one of Craig's chef knives from that room, they would probably have to know where they were kept to find them and grab them in the first place. And also finding knives and grabbing them also doesn't kind of fit with the, hey, I just got angry and grabbed something and just started going to town. For it not to be premeditated, not only did it have to be that, there were knives in the room, but they had to be pretty accessible, like right there out in the open. But anyway, the whole point being, if that room, that end one at the hallway where Nanette was attacked, if that room is Craig's, it would make sense that there would be knives kept in that room because he was an apprentice chef. And we also know that he was on holidays from work at that time. So the knives would probably not be left at work. I mean, he may have left them at work, but they would have been there for a while. I mean, why wouldn't he take them home with him? So we know that his knives, if he had his own set, were probably in the house at that time and may have very well been in that end bedroom. But that's not the point I'm making right now. What I'm talking about right now is if the murderer was in that room and she was talking to the murderer and she's turned around to leave and they have grabbed one of Craig's knives and attacked her with it. Now, what did they do when they're done? I don't believe that the killer followed Nanette into the laundry. There's nothing in the crime scene photos that make it look like footprints or anything like that, like someone's followed her in. And it does look like she has leant on the washing machine and has been bleeding there for a little bit. I think they've done all their dirty work out in the hallway and then she's dragged herself into the laundry and they've just taken off down the hallway and then out the front door, well, stopping off around the kitchen area at some stage, of course, because there are some blood spots in the kitchen. But I don't believe that this person followed her into the laundry. Like I said, I may be wrong. I'm not a blood spatter expert. I wish I was, but I'm not. But to me, as a layperson and someone who just watches crime shows and gets all their knowledge off of there, I don't believe that they followed her in. So I think they've attacked her in the hallway, they've done what they had to do in the hallway, and then they've booted it. But the question is, did they take just the one knife, or would they have taken all the knives? I very much doubt that if somebody has grabbed a knife out of Craig's knife set and attacked Nanette with it, I very much doubt that person is then coming back into the bedroom, grabbing all the knives, and then running out the door with the whole lot of them. I would think that they've done what they've done and they've run out the door with just the knife that they were using. And if that is the case, then the rest of Craig's knives should have still been left there. So did the police grab them? Did they test them? Did they know that one's missing, so then assume that that was the murder weapon? Keep in mind, though, that just because Craig was an apprentice chef and he probably had his own knives and he probably kept them in the bedroom, this does not mean that he used it. Doesn't mean that he didn't either, but it doesn't mean that he did. However, on that note, I did wake up in the middle of the night just recently thinking about the fact that Craig told people that he had gone back into the house for something. In his own words, he said, "I remember going back into the house, I needed to get something." This always bothered me. From the very start, this bothered me. And I think that I spoke about it in the very first video I ever did. Because he said that they led him inside and told him to close his eyes. But he said, of course, he opened his eyes and there was a lot of blood. And I thought, what on earth is so important that you need to go back into the house where your mother was murdered while her blood is still all over the place? For the life of me, I cannot think of a single thing that I own that would make me go into the house where my mother was murdered and step over her blood. I don't even think I would go in for my phone, but we know it wasn't a phone because it was 1984. And I have to think that for somebody to lead him in and step him over the blood so that he can go inside the house and get something, I have to think that they thought that whatever he wanted to get was something important. It had to be important, right? I mean, if it was just something frivolous, would they have allowed that? I can't believe they even allowed that anyway, no matter what it was. That just blows my mind. But I have to think if it was something stupid like, oh, I just need to get my jacket, or I need to get my boots, or I need to get, I don't know, just something just lame. I would have to think they would say, hey, you know what, this is a crime scene. You can't do that. Although, once again, I'm shocked and appalled that they didn't. But my point is, for them to lead him in there, I think it had to be something that they thought was important for him to have. So what was so important? Like I said, not a phone, no mobile phones in 1984. He wasn't ripping the landline out. So then I thought maybe a wallet, but he had already left that day to go to the drive-in. I'm pretty sure he took his wallet with him. So what would be so important? Work knives? Would work knives be a good enough excuse to go back in the house? I think you know what I'm getting at here. Did Craig tell them, and when I say them, I think it was the police, but like I said, the way that it's worded in the newspaper article that I got this information from, it doesn't actually say that it was the police that led him in, or even if it was the same day as the murder. Now, it had to be fairly soon because the blood was still there. I think the body, from memory, this is only from memory, I think the body had already been removed. So I don't think he was actually stepping over her body, he was just stepping over her blood. But if it wasn't the police, who on earth would be leading him in there? And once again, blows my mind, why would you do it through the back door? Why not take him through the front? But point being, is that if somebody let him in, it was probably for something that he really did need that he probably couldn't get anywhere else. So did Craig ask them to go into the house to go and get his work knives? This could mean nothing, of course, and maybe he was starting back at work on Monday or maybe even the Saturday. I mean, chefs work on the weekends. Maybe he was starting back at work and he actually did need these knives. And maybe that's why the police didn't take them, because he'd already removed them by the time they got down there to that end of the house. There's nothing in any report that I've seen that said that the police removed a large bunch of knives from the home. But seriously, how lucky do you have to be if you are a murderer and you have gone into this house and you've been in that bedroom and there has been knives right there ready for you to use, and you've grabbed one and you've used it and you've stabbed this poor woman to death, and then you've gone running off out of the house and you've only got that one that you used, so you've run out of the house. And then you start thinking, hey, wait a second, this knife was part of a set. What if the police realise that one's missing, and so then now they know what the murder weapon is? So now I'm sitting there wondering if I should have taken the whole lot of them just to throw police off the scent a little bit more. But then, by a stroke of luck, the murder victim's own son has been allowed to go into the home in the crime scene and remove all the knives. How lucky would that be for this murderer? This would also explain, though, why Craig said he had to go in to get something. Because if my mother had been stabbed to death, the last thing I'm going to say to the media or anybody is I went back into the house and got my knives. However, if it was a jacket or smokes or a wallet or shoes, then you wouldn't have any problem saying that to the media. You would say, I went back into the house because I needed to get my jacket. I went back into the house because I needed to get my shoes. I went back into the house because I needed to get my wallet. He doesn't say any of those things. He says, I needed to get something. It's very vague. But if you were going back in to get your work knives, I doubt you would say to the media, I went back into the house to get my knives. Now, once again, this does not say that Craig is the one that did it, because if I'll use my name, I'll use me as an example here so that I don't say Craig, because I don't need to be sued by using his name, but just I'll say me, okay, as an example. Now, if I killed my mother with a knife and I went back to get the work knives, I would say to the media or to the reporter or whoever the hell he was talking to. It was a Herald Sun article, so whoever he was talking to. But I would say to them, I had to go back in the house to get something. I sure as hell would not say knives when I'm the one that used those knives to kill my mum. But, and this is the most important but, if I didn't kill my mum, I sure as hell would not tell the media that I had gone back in the house for knives. I definitely would say to them, I had to go back in the house to get something. Absolutely, 100%. If I was totally 100% innocent, I never would tell them I'd gone back in to get knives. That is just asking for trouble. People already think that he did it. There are some people, of course, not everybody, think that he has something to do with it. So if he actually said that to the media, that he had gone back into the crime scene because he had to go get his knives, I mean, can you imagine? Guilty or innocent, you'd have to be a total moron to say something like that to a journalist. Makes me wonder what the journalist was thinking too. I mean, surely they thought, why would you go back into that house? What was so important that you needed from that house? And they didn't even ask him when he was right there in front of their face. or on the phone or however they did the interview. But I mean, he has said that. He has said, I went back into the house, I stepped over my mother's blood, and they didn't think to say, what did you go back in there for? Same with those chicks from that podcast that he did as well, that Emily, whatever her name is, whatever, I don't know, and the other one. They didn't think to ask very many questions like that either. So long story short, even though it's not really short because I just blabbed on for quite a while, I was just wondering if that's actually what he went back into the house for, because that has always bothered me, what was so important. And with all the talk of, hey, Craig was an apprentice chef, so there may have been, professional working knives in the bedroom where Nanette was attacked, then it did strike me as, is that what he went back in for? Of course, we don't know, probably never know, because I doubt Craig will ever tell us. It would be good to know. But just a thought anyway. What do you think? But I did just want to quickly reiterate that, I'm not saying that he did it, but if he didn't do it, if he's totally innocent and he just said, I had to get something, and he did actually go get the knives, I did not blame him for 1 second for not stating what he went back in there for. So what does all this mean anyway? Well, nothing as usual. Maybe the killer is left-handed. Maybe Craig went back in to get his work knives. And M was not a very nice friend, either way you look at it, whether she was just ringing, or whether she was driving past the house at the time. I swear the more information we get on this, the more confusing and speculative it gets. And before I go, there was just one more thing that I wanted to talk about, and that is that I watched that Speedway Murders documentary on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. I know if you're listening to this, you're probably going to be interested in that. That was a case from 1978 that I've always had an interest in because it's so, what the hell? There's so many questions. But it's a really good documentary, and even the way that they do it is a little bit different than other crime documentaries I've seen before. They kind of have the 4 murder victims sitting in the restaurant and speculating on stuff kind of thing. It's kind of hard to describe, but you'll see it when you see it. Not the actual murder victims, of course, because they've long been buried, but actors who played the murder victims. It's a really good documentary. I'm sure you'll like it. But the bit at the end is the bit that has to do with what we're talking about here in Nanette's case. And I don't want to spoil the ending for you, and I don't know if this would spoil it. I think that after I say this, you probably still would want to watch it anyway. But just in case, if you really, really hate spoilers that much, then just stop this video right now and then go and watch the documentary first so I don't ruin it for you. It's been out for a little while now, so I'm sure all you crime junkies probably have seen it. But at the end of this documentary, there is a guy that they're interviewing, and he said that he knew the guy who did it. And the guy who did it told him all the details. And he basically just lays it all out. It was always so puzzling to me why they would take the 4 workers, the burger joint workers, why they took them with them. If it was a robbery, I mean, there's no reason to take them in your van with you. And if you actually were going to kill them, then why not just do it right there in the store? Why take them away from the restaurant? I just couldn't understand it. But I believe this guy when he says what he says, mainly because the stuff that he says makes it all make sense. It pretty much answered all the questions that I had. So I believe him because it makes sense. But why is this relevant to Nanette's case? I promise I'm not telling you this just to tell you what I did on the weekend. It's relevant because when they had this guy on there and he was telling this story, the heading at the start was the 40-year secret. This guy had known this information for 40 years. The guy who did it had told him this information, a little bit here and there over the years. But basically, this guy had been sitting on this secret for 40 years. The friend who told him this stuff died in 2011, and he still didn't say anything to anybody. When he was talking, I was thinking that maybe he was waiting to tell people until after the murderer died, so there wouldn't be any repercussions or anything. But even though the killer died in 2011, this guy that knew all the details still didn't say a single word until a documentary crew came knocking on his door. Like a decade later. A decade after this guy has died. When I saw this, the first thing that popped into my mind was Nanette. There's probably somebody out there other than Nanette's killer who knows who this person is, knows the details of the crime. The murderer, after 40 years, has probably told somebody something. And if you are that person, if you're that person that the murderer has told, hey, I killed this woman, or any other details of the crime, or if you even think that you know who did this and you're sitting on it and you're not telling anybody, I have to tell you right now that you are an absolute sack of shit. I understand that you might be fearful, you might worry about repercussions. I understand that, okay? So maybe calling you a sack of shit is a little harsh, but it's important that if you know something that you come forward. And there are ways that you can do this anonymously. You can ring Crime Stoppers, although you might be waiting a while, or you can email me. Everyone who emails me knows that I do my absolute best to make sure that nothing that I say on the channel can lead anyone back to them. In fact, I don't even know who these people are, and I've had people go to tell me who they are, and I always tell them, don't tell me, I don't want to know. That way, if anyone comes to try to break my legs to find out who these people are, it doesn't matter because I don't know who these people are. So if you want to give out some details that can possibly solve this crime and get justice for Nanette and her family, and you don't want to go to police, you don't want to call Crime Stoppers, anything like that, email me. My email is in the description. I will keep your identity safe. If you're trying to protect that person, they're not worth protecting. Not only is that person a cold-blooded killer, but they've put the information onto you so you get to carry a secret around with you for 40 years. That's not a friend, and if you think it is a friend, you need to get better friends. It's a horrible burden to carry. Unburden yourself and set it free. I always watch crime shows and you see these ones where the wife gives their husband an alibi for the murder, and it can go for 20 years, and then they get divorced and the wife straight shot down to the police station to say, hey, that alibi that I gave him is not true. He wasn't there, blah, blah, blah. We've all seen that stuff, right? And I used to watch that sort of stuff and think, what sort of person knows this information, knows that somebody has brutally killed someone and doesn't say anything? What sort of person is that person? And when I see one where their crime has been going on for so long, I sit there and think, well, surely they haven't told anybody, because how could they have told somebody and somebody has sat there for 40 years and not said anything? But this person did. This person with the Speedway murders, they kept it in for 40 years. So while I'm sitting here thinking, surely people aren't going to hold this in for 40 years. I mean, what sort of sack of shit would do that? There he is. I've been proven wrong when I thought that nobody could possibly do that. There are actually people out there who would hold that in for that long, even long after the murderer is dead, and not give closure to the families. I mean, in the Speedway murders cases, this is 4 families that could have gotten closure years ago. I'm sure that they've had family members who have died not knowing what happened to these 4 innocent people. And yet this guy could have let them know, and so they had some peace before they left this earth. And now Nanette's family has had to wait 40 years with nothing, and they may all go to their graves not knowing what happened to their mum and who did this to their mum, and who not only just did this to their mum but absolutely changed their lives. Their lives changed because of this. They're different people now than what they would have been if this person hadn't done this to their mum. Samantha would have had a grandmother. So if you know something, don't wait. It's really important. Any of these people who need the closure could go to their graves tomorrow. It's tragic enough that this beautiful woman died in such a horrendous way, but to continue the grief for her family by not coming forward when you can just give them the closure that they so well deserve, don't be that person. Just, if you know something, say something. That's the end of my rant. It makes me so mad to think that there might be somebody out there who knows something and they're just not saying anything. That makes me just absolutely furious. But like I said, like, share and subscribe. Hopefully this video will get in front of that person and they'll have a really good think about themselves and think, yeah, maybe it's time to put all this to rest. If you're that person, think about what you're doing, and for everybody else, have a great day.